In today's video, I'm going to share with you the profit and loss statement from my third year in business as a part-time florist. I'm going to explain what was going on that year in my business because there was a lot of changes happening. I'm also going to discuss how I made money, what I spent money on, and I'll talk through why increased income doesn't always mean increased profit. I'm Ellen Frost. I'm the owner of Local Color Flowers, and I've been a florist for over 15 years. I write a weekly newsletter all about flowers, which you should definitely check out if you haven't subscribed yet. And I'm building a community of flower nerds online. If you like this content, please do subscribe to my YouTube channel. So 2010 was my third year in business. This was definitely a year of change and growth for my business. I was still working part-time, but I was whittling down my day job hours with an eye to making a transition to full-time florist pretty soon. In my third year, which was 2010, I brought in over $50,000 in wedding income. This was more than 3 times the wedding income I brought in my first year in business. Um, Also, by year three, I was starting to add additional revenue streams. I started working on holiday designs, which brought in almost $1,000. I was doing more parties and special events and some corporate events, which brought in over $4,000 in year three. And then I was also just dipping my toe into single order arrangements, so like daily delivery arrangements. In year three, that brought in almost $1,000. That year three, I wasn't really sure which revenue streams besides weddings were going to be right for me. So I was sort of trying a bunch out. I wasn't really sure in what direction I was going to go. And over my career, I've tried a ton of different revenue streams. I've tried just about all of the ways you can make money. And if you're interested in learning more about those revenue streams, those that I tried, and sort of my take on how hard or easy it is to make money using those revenue streams, I've put a link in the notes to a free webinar that I made called 9 Florist Revenue Streams Revealed. You can check it out. That might give you a sense of all of the ways that you can try to make money as a florist. So in year 2010, that was my third year in business, my income increased, the amount of work I was doing increased, and my cost of goods sold increased. So if you're not sure what the cost of goods sold are, that is the direct costs associated with bringing a product to market. So for me as a florist, those things included day labor, transportation costs like gas, and then material costs, which were by far and continue to be my largest expense in my cost of goods sold. So in year three, I definitely needed more help, more day labor help to execute the weddings that I was doing. So I was hiring more people on the weekends to help with design and delivery. That cost almost $4,000. My transportation costs also increased. So I was driving around more to pick up flowers. I was doing more deliveries. So my transportation costs were about $900 that year. And then my material costs. Those are always the bulk of my cost of goods sold. And in year three, I spent over $26,000 in material costs. And the majority of that, $22,000, was in flowers. And I do source all of my flowers locally. So local flowers are more expensive than conventionally sourced flowers. That is just a fact. As much as I wish they weren't, that is the case. So in year three, my cost of goods sold were almost $31,000. That's about 55% of my income. And the standard in the industry is about 30 to 35%. So I was way over my cost of goods, where my cost of goods sold should have been. And that was the same in year one and the same in year two. So I was seeing a pattern now. And there were a lot of explanations for this. I was still overbuying. Part of that is because I wasn't using a specific recipe for my designs. When sourcing locally, that makes it kind of difficult to use a specific recipe because you're never really sure what flowers you're going to use. So I didn't really see recipes being the answer for me. So what I started doing was trying to find ways to sell the overage that I had. And that's really how my single orders began. Um, Local flowers are just more expensive. And I didn't really see a way around bringing my flower costs down. I knew I had to try to figure something out because they were just too high. But I wasn't really sure how to do that. So in 2010, just to review, I had $56,000 in income. I spent almost $31,000 on my cost of goods sold, and my gross profit was $25,602. So my gross profit was about 45% of my overall income. And really, when you're looking at gross profit, you want that to be 50% or higher. Um, and mine was a little bit low. So I was still bringing in a lot of money, but my cost of goods sold were still very high, leaving me with less gross profit than I'd like. So, with my gross profit of $25,000, I had to pay for all of my other business expenses. And in year three, my business expenses skyrocketed. So it was really a year of transition. And like, what do they say? You have to spend money to make money. This was definitely a year of spending money to try to increase sales. So in 2010, year three, I bought a van. And the van seemed like a necessity to me because we were booking bigger weddings, we were booking weekday events, and we really needed a van or a vehicle that was bigger than just my personal car. So I knew that we could still rent, which we did once in a while, but having a dedicated vehicle for the business seemed to make the most sense. So, in addition to buying the van, I also spent $3,000 on wrapping the van, like so putting our logo on it and getting it all ready to be a commercial vehicle. And then this was not necessarily part of the plan for year three, but by the end of 2010, I found a space to rent. So this was the first time I was paying rent, and rent was about $800 a month. And with that came the cost of utilities, the cost of insurance, the cost of maintenance. I had to build a cooler in this space. So I really found that my costs increased a lot, but I felt like I needed to do that because working out of my house was no longer feasible. It just really was not possible for me to execute large weddings with a large team out of my house. So my total expenses for year three were over $22,000. That's 10 times the amount of expenses from my first year when I worked at home and I didn't have a vehicle. So year three was definitely a year of growth, but also a year of increased expenses. So, did I make any money that year? Let's see. My income was about 56,000. My cost of goods sold were about 31,000. That left me $25,602 to pay for all of my expenses. With my increased expenses of 22,339, my net profit was $3,200, $3,263. And as a note, I still was not taking any sort of salary in year three. I was working a full time job. I was living off of that income from my full time job, my salaried job. But I did, for the first time at the end of 2010, take a disbursement as the owner. I took a $6,000 disbursement. So while I had been leaving all of the money in the business for the last 3 years, I did at the end of that year take a $6,000 disbursement. But I felt like I was still doing okay. I was still in the growing phase of the business. I still had a full time job that was paying me, a salary. So I was still viewing this as a growth period for the business. So, what were some of my takeaways after year three? Well, for sure, growth means more income, but it also means more expenses. I knew this, but as it played out, my growth almost equaled my increased expenses. So I knew I needed to either increase my income, decrease my expenses, or both moving forward. Another takeaway: securing a space increased costs, obviously, but I don't think I fully estimated what all of those costs would be. So, in addition to rent at a new space, I had utilities, I had insurance, I had to build a cooler, I had to buy other stuff, garbage cans and light bulbs, and all kinds of things that just I didn't have to do when I worked at home. But securing a space also meant increased opportunity. I was able now to take on larger weddings. Because I had built a cooler, I was able to do work earlier in the week and keep stuff in the cooler rather than just doing everything like the day of the wedding. So I was able to take on multiple jobs at once, which really helped increase my income. So while there was drawbacks to renting the space, just increased cost, it also allowed me some really big opportunities going forward. Basically had the same situation with buying a vehicle. There were increased costs. So I had the loan payment, insurance, maintenance. But I also had increased opportunity. I was able to take jobs during the week where before, if it didn't fit in my car, I wasn't really going to rent a vehicle during the week. So I was able to take on larger jobs, more jobs, and having a dedicated vehicle was just like logistically easier too, because I wasn't having to run around to rent vehicles. My final takeaway for year 3 was, looking back, that maybe it would have been better to stagger those big purchases. So I didn't go into year 3 thinking I'm going to rent a space and buy a van. I was thinking I needed a vehicle. And so I did it early in the year, buy that vehicle. But as the business continued to grow in year 3, it just became very clear that we needed a space to work out of that was not my home. So it would have maybe been better to wait one more year, just so that I could have planned a little bit more for the expensive rent. But that was just how it worked out. A space became available. We needed a space, and I just went ahead and rented that new space. So maybe looking back, I would have tried to stagger those big purchases a little bit. But I was still in a growth phase, and I was eager to really get the business going at a level that would allow me to work on it full time. So, in future videos, I will tell you a little bit about how I left my full time job to work full time as a florist and what the income and expenses looked like when I did that. So, if you liked this video, please leave a comment and be sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel.